I see successful entrepreneurs exiting their business, and then they've lost their wife, they lost their kids, they lost their friends because they became a slave to becoming successful, and then they say, what the hell do I do with my time? If you look at the word entrepreneurship, comes from the French, and it is taking action between things. So between, I interpret that as between successes. So to me, being an entrepreneur is to take action while you're failing between successes. They figure out ways to make more money, but then they become a slave to the job. They have to be there 24/7, 365 days a year. They can't take any vacation time. They can't spend any money. And now they're burning out.
With me today is Razmig Malkhassian. He's the CEO of BDH Growth Strategy, and he has a simple guiding principle. If effort alone could fix it, you'd already be scaling. Razmig, how are you feeling today?
Wonderful. Excited to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, I want to start with a couple of things that we were talking a little bit off camera, and I think these are important pieces because sometimes people, they got to a specific point through brute effort and force because that's what was needed in the beginning, and after a certain specific time that kind of doesn't work anymore, or you kind of lost and confused, starting having doubts. What are you doing and why are you doing it? Or are things good, bad? A lot of advices, all these things. So let's just kind of break down all those noises and just focus on the signals. So let's start with the first one we talked about. Problem without a solution is a complaint. That's what I said. That's what I've heard from one of my friends, that he says a well-defined problem is a problem half resolved. A problem without a solution is a complaint. How do you feel about that?
I feel that that's a cup half empty type of approach. For me, I agree with the first part of it. The second part, I challenge that way of thinking. For me, a problem without a solution is a challenge. That's the way I look at it. And the challenge, you have to step up to the challenge, work on the problem, find the solution, and usually I find that with that perspective, even the most complicated challenges, problems, I find very simple solutions.
When we talk about stepping up to the challenge, what are the main reasons that you've seen business owners or leaders run away from the challenge?
It's not so much that they run away from the challenge, it's that they run into a dead end with a challenge by their perspective, their legacy behaviors, the patterns that they've built, not realizing that the solution lies in what they don't know or what they forgot that they know. So it's a question of looking at it correctly from the right angle, from getting the right constraints, and looking at it from anything is possible type of situation. And typically when that happens, instead of running, okay, let me take a step back. The question was, CEOs have a tendency of running away from challenges?
That's right. It's more of you have a challenge and there are patterns that people would kind of run away from the challenge. For example, I'll use myself as an example.
Yeah.
When you're like, Q1's going to be slow, and you're kind of getting ready, and as you're in the midst of it, in the middle, you start to doubt yourself. What am I doing? Are these things working? Is it bad? Is it like worse than it was before? But the challenge is to kind of go through it and find solutions in that Q1 or whatever that situation is. But the tendency is to like, I want to run away from this challenge, or you want to find something else, and you kind of getting away from that opportunity, I would say, to get better, I guess.
Okay. It's interesting that you put it that way. You said Q1 is going to be slow. That's usually the first step where we fall into that trap and get into a pattern of wanting to completely avoid that situation. The first step is, instead of making a statement, is ask the right question. My approach would be, how can I maximize Q1? Instead of just accepting that it's going to be a challenge. Yeah, every quarter is going to be challenge. Every situation is a challenge. What I find interesting is that life without challenges is boring, and typically that Carol Dweck talks about closed mindset and growth mindset. Uh, when somebody sees a problem and tries to avoid that problem, that's a signal of a closed mindset where you're looking for situations where you know you can succeed. But when you're in business, you're actually looking for situations where it's outside of your comfort zone. You're finding new solutions, things that others haven't tried or experimented with or developed. So my definition of business is solving a problem. If you don't solve a problem, there's no business. So I'm surprised that that way of thinking even comes up. To me, that doesn't even exist in my vocabulary.
So it feels like you're saying if you are stepping up to the plate and someone told you that entrepreneurship is the freedom to da 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 and financial freedom and all this, you would say you need to start feeling comfortable being outside of your comfort zone most of the time, because most of your day is problem solving for monetary compensation.
Yes. Entrepreneurship gives you a level of freedom that cannot be obtained in a job. That's for granted. However, it comes with its own constraints, challenges, and that's what most people don't realize. When you're in a job, you're operating within a system that somebody else created. So the limits of that are the freedom that you don't have. However, you have the freedom of not having to create the system. When you're in entrepreneurship, what most people don't realize is that your job as an entrepreneur is creating that system. And that gives you freedom, but it also has limitations that if you approach it as a job, you're going to be very unsuccessful and very unhappy as an entrepreneur. So
that's right. It's interesting that you said it, and I feel like that's the beginning. People would use inspiration from their job and they will try to create that into their business, or some go the opposite way. I hated my job and they just do everything opposite of that. But you mentioned one thing that I want to spend some time on is, if you approach it the wrong way, you will be unhappy. There's a lot of unhappy entrepreneurs. They feel like they're doing the right thing. When they talk with you, do you see some sort of pattern? What they keep surfacing up as reasons for being unhappy?
There's actually 5 levels I found. The level we're talking about is somebody that's in a job, feels that they don't usually express it that way, but that's how it presents itself, that they're not happy in that system. They believe that they have a better mousetrap. They go off creating that mousetrap, but still in the mindset of a employee. So what happens is that they typically create a job for themselves, and that's great. And that experience of not being constrained by a boss, not having to answer to a system that doesn't resonate with them, is good, until they hit a certain point where their way of operating and the way that they've set up the system gets to a limitation, because we expect a certain amount of financial freedom from entrepreneurship. We expect a certain amount of time freedom from becoming an entrepreneur, being free from the shackles of a boss. As an employee, you have one boss. As an entrepreneur, you have the bank as your boss. You have the customer as your boss. You have your spouse as your boss. You have the demands of the business as your boss. You have multiple bosses. So you have to be ready for that. So what happens is they get to a certain stage where what they know carries them until there. But if the expectation is to have financial freedom, you can't start the job of an entrepreneur as an employee. So they get to a point maybe to make the same amount of money as they did in their job, but then they're blocked. there has to be a shift in the way they show up, in the way they operate, in the way they run their entrepreneurship journey, so that they can access that financial freedom. Then what happens is that they figure out ways to make more money, but then they become a slave to the job. They have to be there 24/7, 365 days a year. They can't take any vacation time. They can't spend any money. And now they're burning out. So now they have to create the system in a way that it provides financial, not only financial freedom, but time freedom. Later, what happens is that they have the time freedom, that they have the financial freedom, but then they say, is that it? I thought it was going to be more than this. Because life, you could have all the money in the world, you could have all the time in the world, but typically that's when entrepreneurs fall into the trap of consumption, overindulgence. So now it's a question of significance. So there's different stages of evolution that entrepreneurs go through. And what I like to do is I like to take them from whatever stage they're at, where they feel trapped, and I help them redesign the way they create their formula for entrepreneurship so that it gives them what they're actually looking for, not what they need. And that's why I call myself the inner game architect.
It's a very nice pattern, because I can, looking through my journey, I started noticing those patterns, and especially when I had, so I had my daughter, and then I had my son, and when I had my son, that was when slave to the job, because you're like, I'm going to create more, and it's just like more brute force, because that's how you got to a specific point, and then you start to feel like, why did I started this? It was supposed to be for spending more time with the family. It was supposed to take my son to soccer class. It was supposed to be spending long weekends whenever I want, and that was not happening at all. And then there was a day that we went to a camp, and in the middle of the night, we're sitting at the campground, and I was like, you know what? This is the first time I took a day off, and I don't worry that everything will fall apart. And it was after systems were implemented, and I still remember that day, because it was like, okay, so this is how this freedom thing would work. It was many years later down the road. But one thing I will ask in this process is, you mentioned a couple of times, which was the legacy patterns. And as someone that moved to Canada, I wasn't born here. My parents had a very different view on business, on entrepreneurship. My grandparents, very different life than what I have. So there were legacy patterns, if I'm understanding that correctly, that impacted the whole journey. Talk to me a little bit more about legacy patterns, because I think I have some assumptions, but I want to hear it, how you present them, how you see them.
And I empathize with you, because I'm also not born in Canada. My parents come from a very different culture. My culture is Armenian, which is very different, very paternalistic, very family-centric. And they grew up in Eastern Africa. So that was another different type of culture compared to Canada. So the legacy patterns that he brought with me is that with him is that I'm the head of the family. I know what's best. Do what I need you to do, and this is the pattern I've fixed for you. This is how I do business. This is how I'm going to teach you how to do business. And those were legacies that he had brought with him here. What I noticed is that the culture, the business environment, the situation was completely different here. There were freedoms that you did not have there. That freedom brought some responsibilities that his legacy patterns didn't give me the tools to handle. So what happens is, I'll give you one example. Their way of doing business is you have to be involved and you have to control everything. And that's great. But what I've noticed is that anytime my father pulled away from a project, that project fell apart. Because he was the driving force and he didn't put in the effort necessary to create the continuity. So that's one legacy pattern. Another legacy pattern is you've gone through school being taught how to be an employee. You've raised by your parents. Typically, they do their best, but they don't know how to be good parents. And if you have legacy patterns, tell me if this sounds familiar. Shut up, don't be seen, and listen. Your opinion doesn't count. I don't know if that was something in your family, but basically that was mine. What happens there is that you get into a job and you're expected to perform. In entrepreneurship, it's a little different. You're not expected to have the answer. Obviously, you need to have some answers, but in entrepreneurship, you're expected to, if you look at the word entrepreneurship, comes from the French, and it is taking action between things. So I interpret that as between successes. So to me, being an entrepreneur is to take action while you're failing between successes. And legacy patterns that schools have given us and jobs have given us is that you have to be successful all the time. So one has a tendency of breaking you or stopping you from developing into your entrepreneurship success in the way you want. And everybody's version of success is different. So that's just an example of some legacy patterns that I've noticed. And there's many, many more.
Right. And I think there was...
And by the way, Zivko, I've noticed 7 from working with entrepreneurs, being in business, and observing my father over 30 years. 7 patterns. One I called the firefighter. One is the savior. The other one is there's 7 patterns that I've noticed that recur all the time. And I've addressed those, and I've even identified why they happen, how to notice, how to recognize them, and how to prevent them from happening. So I just wanted to mention that 7 that I've seen happen all the time.
I think it's called a pattern for a reason, because as you were explaining, there were some that you definitely hit on. For example, specifically like to not be seen, like just do the job and you live after 9 to 5, and you live after 9 to 5. There's no, like, it's expected that this will just suck basically. But look at your grandparent. He did 35 years in the same company. That was like a normal thing. There was no expectation. And even in some cases, the grandparent goes out, the father goes in the same company. It's like 2 generations. That was a very common thing. And when you go into entrepreneurship, it's very dynamic, very different. So when you're going through, I remember some of these conversations that I had with my family. I would say the stuff that I'm going through, and they're like, just stop it. Just, why are you doing this to yourself? They don't see it as that's part of the journey. That's part of the in-between success and failures. It's more like you're suffering. Just get a job. Everything will be stable. It's fine. Like, what are you trying to do with all these things? And that pattern was, I was looking for validation. Mm-hmm. And after a while, I realized it's from the wrong place. They're kind-hearted. There is no ill will or bad intentions, but that is their world. And after reading The Psychology of Money, where he mentions, if you lived through the Great Depression, nothing will make you invest in the stock market. It's just, that's what you lived through it. And there's no bad intentions. It's just, that was the reality that shaped that person. So that's how I understood it. And I started looking for that validation in those patterns, because I'm like, I'm looking at it from the wrong place. Let's talk about other stuff. And I stopped talking about business in general.
Absolutely. And patterns started breaking when the industrial age started. After industrial age, automation started. Then the information age started. Now AI, and the changes that are coming faster, harder, bigger. And they were talking that I've started hearing messages and information about huge quantities of jobs being laid off. there's no job security anymore. The only job security is the security you create for yourself.
And I've heard a lot of those, and they keep giving timelines, which I think that is too optimistic, or it's a guesstimate at best. But you keep hearing these. Exactly. Nobody knows exactly the timelines, but the changes are much faster. And so let's say when you're going through the 5 levels, on the top level, I think that one is interesting as well, because some people do get to that place, and we've seen it as spectators on a TV where you see like this person was so successful and just bad decisions, just bad after one. And you were saying it's all like that over indulging and stuff like that. Does that correlate with someone that would completely lose their job stability, where their identity is wiped off or completely changed? So on one spectrum, you have someone that achieved everything and feels like what else is there, and on the other spectrum, you have someone that, because of AI or all these changes, they lost the job stability and they're asking, what is there to do?
Yeah, I see both. Absolutely. Now, I'm not sure I understand the question that the answer you're trying to drive at, or the question you're trying to bring up, but I constantly see people, especially in lower end jobs that were barely finding work. They're definitely at a loss right now, because computer programmers, people in IT that have high educations, university degrees, are having to replace them for jobs, and those without the education that were at the bottom of the rank are falling further down. On the other spectrum, what I'm noticing is that if their intentions are not aligned with what is really important for them, when they do achieve success, they get lost in the abundance. They get drunk on the abundance. But if the intention is set correctly, now significance starts to make sense, and they have the tools in order to apply that abundance to the right outlets instead of just wasting away. So it's all about first of all, understanding what you really want, why you want it, and what you really need in order to become fulfilled in what you're doing. Because my dad, when he passed away, it was about 5 years ago, he passed away with regret for having failed at what his plan was. I see successful entrepreneurs exiting their business, and then they've lost their wife, they lost their kids, they lost their friends, because they became a slave to becoming successful, and then they say, what the hell do I do with my time? And they have no idea what to do. So that misalignment in what they're trying to achieve and what they really need to achieve is very important. And it has to be set at the beginning. Otherwise, what happens is you get started, like you, then you have to reinvent yourself and take a step back, and then take a couple of steps forward, and then reinvent yourself. So it's that constant back and forth. But if you do it correctly from the beginning, there's a better chance that you do it smoothly and you minimize those ups and downs. And I don't know if I answered your question, and I apologize if I'm rambling on, but this subject for me is it's something that I'm passionate about.
I feel like you're answering it exactly how I was positioning the question, because my goal was to understand that identity, because a lot of people will lose it on the lower end when their job are being like reduced and cut and completely changed, and then on the higher end, that person is losing his identity because he has abundance, and there's just no one saying no to everything is a yes. There is no limits, and it feels like on the extreme spectrum, both are feeling the same thing. And the way that you were explaining is, I'm noticing patterns that someone can have the significance, or someone loses their job and then they go into drinking and they abuse substances and destroy their marriage and destroy their life. And it feels like you want to have an understanding of what you really need, what you derive significance from, be in alignment, otherwise you will lose your way. It doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or if you have a regular job. Is that significance, what you really need, what you want to achieve, and don't have that regret. Go for it, try it, because what is on the other end? Like, it's just a challenge that makes you into a better version of yourself. That is every single outcome after successfully completing a challenge. And it's, to me, it sounds like what you're seeing when you're talking with a lot of people is the significance. They kind of don't know where they pull that motivation, and they need some sort of a guidance. Is there a framework, or is there some things that people can check within themselves to be like, this is your guiding path, and if you have answers, that will guide you in the right direction?
Yes, there is a framework. The challenge that most people have is they come from a perspective that doesn't position them to really achieve what they're dreaming of, because their frame of reference is usually their parents, their teacher, their boss, the wrong mentor. So my suggestion would be, understand that nothing is created without struggle. So if it's comfortable, that means you're, especially in today's day and age where change is the only constant and it's accelerating. So if you're looking for comfort, know that that comfort zone is going to disappear tomorrow anyways, without you doing anything, because change is moving the goalpost. So if you're right in the spot today, tomorrow that goalpost is no longer there. So don't try to be fixed. Accept that there's change, evolve towards what you're looking for. And the best way to do it that I found is find the person that you're trying to become. Find the person that is already there and just latch on to that person and get on their tailcoats and emulate what they're doing, partner up with them, collaborate with them, try to figure out a way that you can bring value to them, learn from them, help them improve, whatever way, and just enjoy the roller coaster ride. That's the best framework I can give you, because we're living in an age of chaos and everybody's afraid of chaos. I celebrate the chaos because this is bringing huge opportunities.
It sounds like the anti-fragile approach, where you get stronger, not a more robust system, but like more stronger systems with every stressor or anything that happens like that. Now, in all the chaos, because it is normal, it is happening all the time consistently. Do you have ways that people can kind of move in a way that it doesn't give them stability? It's not about stability, but it moves them in a way that they know there is some sort of a light at the end of the tunnel. Like, is there a signal to be like, you're doing the right thing, you're challenging, this is not a pivot, this is go through it, the obstacle is a challenge and stuff like that? Is there any signal to know you're on the right path, or you're going down really the wrong one? And I'll give you an example what I mean by that. Someone being stuck, I'm not going to touch AI at all, and you're like, this is not helpful. I'm not saying adopt everything, I'm saying it's just not the right attitude to say, I'm not going to touch it, I'm not going to adopt anything, I don't want to learn, I don't want to. It's like you're shying away from it completely. That's what I mean by saying you are challenging yourself, you are going in the right path, or you're going down the wrong path because you're maybe stuck in your own ways.
Interesting question. Before I answer your question, though, about change, chaos, and all of that, if you notice, we have two completely different hairstyles.
Yes.
Do you know what the difference between your hairstyle and my hairstyle is?
Objective, subjective.
The point I'm trying to make is life is a balance between destruction and creation. The only reason you have hair on your head is because your body is generating more hair follicles than it's losing every day. When your body starts creating less than you're losing, you get to my point. So to answer your question is that the only way you're going to know is that I would start with forget AI, forget the job market, forget Donald Trump, forget the war in Iran, forget all of that stuff. That in one shape or form, there's always stuff going on. If you want to latch on to that, that's what's going to dictate the direction of your life. So my suggestion, and this is what I live by, is I have a vision, I have an intention for my life. And that is a vision that's on the horizon, that is impossible for me to achieve. I have no idea how I'm going to get there. I just know that that's what I want to drive towards. So number one. Then number two is figure out, moving backward, what would need to happen, if that was possible, what would need to happen for you to achieve that? Then step back into today. What's the next thing that you would need to happen, in order for you to get there? So I'll give you an example related to AI. I want to create a business where I have time freedom and it scales and I don't have to reinvent it. AI came up and I have no idea. I don't have the funds to hire all the people, and I don't want to have a kindergarten running. I used to run a 100 employee business 30 years ago. I said, no more. So what I did is I started learning, interacting to figure out how AI can help me create a system that would operate with minimal employees. Then I realized, here's my next challenge. I'm working on a project. I get an idea. It's a great idea. It's a flash of genius. 10 minutes later, because I need to finish what I'm doing, the idea is gone. And damn, I wish I had written that. But if I write that down, then I end up with a pile of papers and I can't find anything. So what I figured out is how to use AI in order to help me to keep track of all that stuff. And now my AI, I've programmed it to become an executive assistant for me. So it tells me when I'm doing something wrong. It reminds me when I forgot to do something. It tells me, hey, you're trying to do this, but before that you need to do this. So it's keeping me honest. So 6 months ago, I never used AI. And because my vision is to create that situation, I figured out a way to use AI to my advantage instead of being afraid of it. The danger is that every time that a new tool comes up, the mobile phone, AI, the pencil, we lose a skill that we had. When written language came up, we started losing the ability to tell stories. Yes, we were able to record, but recording made us lose the ability to memorize and remember things and communicate things verbally. And today, the biggest challenge people have, from what I'm noticing, is they don't even know how to talk, not only to other people, but to themselves.
Yes, I've noticed the messages, you've seen them, they're all the same. And you're like, because you're on the receiving end, I think people don't understand, like, it's the copy paste. It's like there's no uniqueness, like we used to see different angles and stuff like that.
Not only that, but I bring that back to your point. Most people will try to figure out how to adapt to the changes and the loss of job and all. And most people I notice is when they're struggling, they have a tendency of closing off and try to figure things out because they feel shame, they feel confused, they don't trust people. I don't know, they don't trust themselves. But the conversations that I notice most people having with themselves, like you mentioned, Q1 is going to be bad. Just the conversations that they have with themselves blocks their potential. So my suggestion comes back to find someone that's achieved what you're trying to achieve and just follow their lead, ask for their help, and see how you can give them value.
Now, one of the things that we were also mentioning, and I think this is a nice flow because we're going directly into that. We mentioned off camera, complain is an opportunity to make money. And I'm hearing that I'm complaining a lot. I'm throwing a lot of complaints at you. I'm saying, how about this one? How about that? People are asking these questions, and you're saying, look, there's a lot of craziness in the world. It always has been. I'm hearing a lot of complaints, but your mindset is complaining or complaints is an opportunity to make money. So how would that work?
Well, if you listen to a complaint as I need help. So when somebody complains to me, the way I interpret it is, most people will say, oh man, another complainer is going to bring me down. I don't want to listen to this. So they're actually complaining about the complaining. What I hear is, this is somebody that is having the courage to share a problem that they have, because they probably are looking for a solution and they don't even realize that there is one. So how can I help them overcome that problem? And that one question has just opened up a multi-year, six-figure collaboration with someone that lives in India that I've never physically met, in an industry that I have known nothing about, Chinese metaphysics. But I just got invited in their inner circle, and I'm going to be an advisor to her business so she can grow it. Simply by asking, how can I help you overcome the problem of her complaint was, people don't understand what I want. I give employees instructions and they just botch it up and I have to go in and do it again. So I looked at that and said, okay, what is the solution to that? And we've been working over the last 6 months on improving how she communicates. Simply. And that has opened up this opportunity. So one question, 6 figures, multi-year commitment, and and now she put me in touch with a group of 11 of her most trusted clients that are looking to grow their business. So that one question is now turning into 12 opportunities.
It's a fantastic complaint to listen to.
I love complaints. Bring them all. My reaction may not be what you expect, but hey.
That's it's an interesting journey, because I think when you are entrepreneurs, well, you don't know where these things come from. So when people are pitching predictable, I will give you a predictable client acquisition way. I will give you a predictable CFO forecast. How do you react when someone says, or when you work with, let's say, for example, that lady or someone like that, when they say I have a predictable, how do you approach that? What do you feel when someone says those things?
Well, I look at it as, okay, tell me what it is that you're all about. And I typically, so first of all, I'm a trained negotiator, closer, and I'm a student of how people sell. So first of all, I want to know how people mess up sales so I can better help them improve and becoming a better salesperson. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, I'm always on the lookout of, okay, what's the real problem that they're trying to solve? So I typically am able to convert those kind of conversations into new opportunities that they didn't even expect. So my reaction to that is, hey, listen, you want to have a conversation? Let's have a conversation. But then when they're having the conversation, I'm listening. Okay, are you doing a good job of selling? What is the problem that you're solving? Who can I help with your solution? Is it something that I can benefit from? Is it something that someone that needs help can benefit from? And that's basically how I approach it. I don't go anytime that somebody wants to have a conversation with me, I know I will find an opportunity to bring value to someone. So I welcome them. That's the way I react.
And when you're saying that, You spend a lot of time listening to sales pitches, and you want to negotiate a lot better. There's a couple of people that are always kind of mentioned. So one of them is like Chris Voss, never split the difference.
Yes.
What do you how do you feel about his negotiating tactics when it comes to B2B?
He's got a very interesting approach, which I like, on breaking through resistance quickly in very high stress situations, life and death situations. And I apply some of his tactics and his strategies. Using no as a yes, that's a very powerful strategy that he has. Never split the difference it depends on how you look at it. If you look at it as a strategy, it can be misused. I look at it as a mindset on negotiating deals. Instead of splitting the difference, which is basically compromising, his approach is figure out what's going to make them move towards you instead of you moving to them. The philosophy there is not necessarily never split the difference, but get them to move to you instead of you start moving to them in finding a deal. Because what he's bringing up, and I don't know if that's obvious to you, but what he says is that if you understand the motivation behind why they're doing things, they'll be more amenable to accept your terms instead of you starting from a position of weakness and trying to figure out how you can adapt to them. Because most people start from that point of view. That's what I get from his strategy there.
There was the reason I asked this was because I had a couple of conversations with some people that do B2B sales, and they were saying Chris Voss is like the strategy on a high level. They were like, I can hit so many positive things, but you can't just take it and use it in every situation because one example someone gave me is like, it's like negotiating with a union. It's 1v1. But when I go into B2B, the other side will not make a career-ending move to say yes to an offer they can't say no to, like Alex Hormozi, something like that. Or they will just not negotiate just with me, where Chris Voss explains situations where it's like 1v1. They will take my pitch, they'll compare it to 5 other people, they will try to find different things, and now we're outside of the negotiating style of Chris Voss because you are not 1v1 and you and I need to find a solution. They will take and pitch. Like if you, let's easy example, a CRM, they will listen to 5 companies that do the CRM and they will find and that's what we were talking about. Like different things will influence, and negotiating like Chris Voss style is only when it's down to you and them and how you want to kind of break that deadlock.
Interesting point that you bring up. I have a feeling that they're focusing on the tactic and not the spirit of what he's saying. Yes, the tactic is typically applied on a one-on-one conversation, but I always believe that the negotiation, even if it's in a committee and a B2B, you have to approach it as you have to be able to connect with each one of those individuals separately, even if you're negotiating on a group. And it's very difficult to negotiate as a group because you'll get mixed signals. But there's a strategy where you can figure out maybe there's a champion in there with whom you can latch onto, or you can figure out the one tip of the lance that is going to move the deal forward that most everybody's missed.
Interesting.
So yeah, taking tactics and trying to apply tactics in all situations is dangerous because a tactic only applies in one particular instance, which is what they're referring to. And I agree with them. But the idea of Chris Voss is that if you look at his strategy, is that high stress environment, he's created situations where you get to their pain point very efficiently and effectively despite that life and death situation. So you cannot take the tactics that he teaches and apply them into a B2B environment where it's a decision by committee. It's a completely different dynamic, but the basic principle still applies. There has to be a pain point, because if there is no pain point, there's no motivation to change. And without change, there's no deal.
Of course. And I feel like some of the stuff that he mentions, I use them all the time, like the labeling stuff. Like, to sum up, did I get that right? Like, those are really, like, it saved me emails and voice notes, because I will just sum it up. Did I get that right? And they will say, no, this is it, or yes. And I always try to tell my whole team, is one of our like core principles, correcting is investing. If someone tells me I'm doing wrong and they're in correcting and investing time, you're good, because we all hate the silent treatment. When you get to the silent treatment, it's too late. It's already, there is no negotiation at that point. Something went too far off. So he has a lot of good stuff that I use every day. And then talking to several people, they were talking about risk and risk aversion in B2B. Like, you need to reduce the risk on the person and reduce the risk on the business as well. So when you negotiate, you just can't use everything Chris Voss, because there's no methods or styles or strategies. He talks about how do you reduce the risk for the person on the other side, and how do you also reduce the risk for the company to charge the premium.
Okay, interesting point that you bring up. I would approach it differently. I would say you have to understand which risk they want to minimize and which risk they want to avoid most. The approach to take in the environment we're in today is people want to avoid more pain. So instead of avoiding risk, I would say lean into risk and highlight the risk of not making a change is the way to go today.
Highlight the risk of not making the change.
Some people call it cost of inaction.
Right. I've heard that one, the cost of inaction.
Cost of inaction.
Right.
So people make decisions based on pain. So when I used to negotiate with my kids to take action, I used to give them two choices, and both were risk. It's just that I gave them the choice of picking the one that gave them the least risk, the least pain.
That's right.
And I let them make the choice. So I would say that today it's about not avoiding risk, but realizing that trying to avoid risk is actually going to create even more risk. That would be a more appropriate approach today, because money is tight right now in the market.
Right. Now, it's very interesting, because I think maybe it's me that I've failed in those conversations. I've always came across too salesy when I'm leaning into or talking about the cost of inaction. And I've always had like a pushback on the other side. Is it the wrong way of framing and positioning, or is it you're talking to the wrong person? They never wanted it anyways. So you're just trying different. You're going at it from all different angles, but the person on the other side is telling you something, you're not listening.
It's a combination of all. In order to effectively deploy the cost of inaction, you have to first understand what is their real pain and what are the struggles that they've been going through, and what it's going to avoid for them to happen, and why that's important for them. You get the information for the cost of inaction at the beginning of the conversation. If you can't just drop it in like a F-bomb at the end of the conversation, because people will say, where's this coming from? But if you use what they said and you bring that back up and you get them to tell you what the cost of inaction is. It's not that, hey, if you do this, this is going to happen. But if you get them to work through the cost of inaction, you walk them towards it, then it becomes less of a, there's no objection to it, because they've figured it out. They've said so.
You walked into the path. Got it. Now, we covered a lot of stuff, but Razmik, if someone wants to work with you, they listen to all the stuff you said, like, this is interesting, I want to get in touch with him. How do people get a hold of you to work with you?
Well, I have a website, and I can give you the link there. It's razmigmalkhassian.com. It's my full name. I have a LinkedIn profile. That's a good way also for anyone that wants to understand a little bit better what I'm about and what I can do. I've got some resources also that are free that will help someone figure out exactly where they are in their readiness to make change, because not everyone's ready to do that. I've got my book on LinkedIn where they can buy and figure out what are the legacy patterns that they're struggling with if they're entrepreneurs, whether they're starting off or they've got a multi-million-dollar business. And from there, you can reach out to me. I've also got a YouTube, but I would say the easiest way to get in touch with me would be LinkedIn. That's the most direct.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing all this information. This was a fantastic conversation. I personally learned a lot, especially about those legacy patterns and those stages of not losing where you are and accepting that life is about, changes and the dynamics and the destroying and the creating. And if you feel like you're going to stay in a reminisce about, back in the day when cost per acquisition was $1, that is the wrong mindset, and just looking forward that changes. You live on the edge of that comfort zone 24/7, and it's a good place to be because the rewards are immense. So I appreciate the time you took to walk us through all those things, and I wish you all the success.
Thank you very much, Zivko, and I appreciate being here. It was a lot of fun for me as well, sharing what I've talked about. You made me remember things I had forgotten that I even know. So I appreciate you for that.